I'm Scott Allen Miller. It is the 30th of January 2023, and this is my vlog of daily life in Central America. So, you want to be a YouTuber? Well, I'm here to help you out. Being a famous YouTuber, as I am with a giant YouTube channel, I have a lot of knowledge and information to be able to impart to all of you. I heard that this is something you're very interested in, so I'm excited to bring you this content here today. Now, before we get started, it is important to understand that being a successful YouTuber is not as simple as just recording a video with your phone and uploading it to YouTube. You see, there's all kinds of things that you need to do. You need to... Wait, what? Being a YouTuber is as simple as just taking a video with your phone and uploading it to YouTube. See, the important thing with YouTube and being a YouTuber is getting content going, getting those videos up and getting something for people to watch. By and large, people don't actually care what kind of device you're recording with. They don't care if you're using an expensive camera, expensive microphones. They do care what the quality of your content is. Are you funny? Are you good looking? Are you providing information that they're interested in? Are you covering topics that are important? That's what really matters. Now, of course, the better the video quality, the better the audio quality, the better the production, the more opportunity you have to grab those people. But if you're not making videos, if you're not getting them uploaded, it doesn't matter. The key thing that all successful YouTubers have in common is that they started uploading videos. That's the one thing they all share. Now, there's many unsuccessful YouTubers who never uploaded anything, and there's plenty who did upload and still failed. Just because you do it is not going to be enough. You do need to have content that people care about, make it findable, that people searching for it can discover it, make it that YouTube wants to show it to people, get the word out, put links places, tell people about your show, make things that people care about, up your value. Of course, you want to do all those things. But at the very beginning, the only thing that actually matters is making videos and getting them uploaded. Until you do that, nothing else is going to matter. So that's our starting point. Everyone's got a phone these days that's able to record absolutely adequate video. Pretty good video, in fact. In some cases, absolutely excellent video. Break it out. Start playing with it. Don't put off getting started on YouTube because you think there's something that you need. Maybe you're making a very specific technology channel and you need that technology in order to do it. Maybe. But in almost all cases, all you really need to do is have a dog, a phone, and get something recorded. Everything else is free or could be free. And that's what we're going to dig into with this show today. We're going to talk about what it takes to get started, what you need to look in those beginning stages so that you can consider what you may need to buy, where you need to invest, what you need to be looking at, what you need to be thinking about as far as actually mechanically making YouTube and other things. There's things we can't really go into, right? I can't help you come up with great content. I'm not coming up with great content. I'm just me talking, right? So I'm not a great content creator, but I'm a good example of someone who just does it, make it happen. I take the effort, and that alone is worth something. If you have some idea for really amazing content, that's going to take you that much farther. If you have a really great presentation, if you have some really great technology or editing or style that you can add to the equation, it's going to take you that much farther. Those first steps, though, just making a video. And I talk to a lot of people on a regular basis who are like, I'm interested in YouTube. What you do seems cool. What I see other people do, that seems cool. I would like to do that. Absolutely. That's where I was, right? And what you need to do to get started, and this is what I did. I took my cell phone at the time. It was a Samsung S9, and I started recording. Yes, I did have a Lumix FZ300, and I did a little bit with that, and that helped. And yes, I had some microphones. Yes, I had a tripod. I had a selfie stick. If you don't have those things, though, you're not stuck. You can get started, and we're going to talk about all of that. We're going to dig into exactly what it takes to make a minimum, and then what you can do to up that game to make it that much better so that you can get the ball rolling on your YouTube channel, because we all want to see more amazing content, more interesting, more varied content coming out on YouTube, because that's what makes YouTube so good, right? We have Netflix for that stuff. We have Hulu, we have Disney Plus, we have HBO. We have these big production studios making traditional content, and in some cases, maybe not that traditional of content. But YouTube takes the rest of the world and gives us a voice for the single creator, a voice for the small team, a voice for the niche topics, for the crazy ideas, for the things that no one would ever make a normal TV show about. They may succeed, they may thrive on YouTube, because you don't need the same size audience, you don't need the same type of production. You have an opportunity to make the next big Netflix show on your own, or to just make a guy sitting in a garden with his dogs talking to the camera. All those things are possible on YouTube, and that makes it exciting because just our variety is so much bigger. So let's get started. We're going to start, very first thing, we're going to talk about cameras and what is a good starting point and what you should be considering as upgrades or additions to your portfolio, your physical camera portfolio, because that's where most of us are going to start, and it's where most of us have the biggest challenge. And after that, we're going to talk about your editing software, because that's where most people start to get stuck as they get started. Once you have that camera, we need to edit that footage, but you don't, not for your first videos. All of my first videos were shot straight out of camera with no editing. Yeah, they were pretty rough, but they worked and they got the channel going, and yours can too. All right, let's talk about cameras. Our first real topic is going to be cameras. Now, many people, when they're getting started on YouTubing, decide that they need to spend a lot of money on getting an expensive or complicated camera. And of course, you can do this, and loads of YouTubers do, and find that it helps them with their channel or believe that it does. I'm recording this on an Olympus OMD EM1 Mark II, which is an exceptionally gorgeous camera that provides a lot of really good detail, beautiful color, and it gives me the ability to use really expensive lenses that allow me to obliterate the background and create this beautiful bokeh effect that looks so good on the channel at times. But I don't want to do that all the time because of the content that I do. A lot of times I want to show you the background, and so I need to have options, and that's important. I can also move in more closely. You'll notice the background disappears, and if I back up, the background comes more into focus. Just little things like that. Those are things you can't necessarily do with all cameras. But does this camera make a really significant difference for my channel? Probably not. I do have a number of viewers who comment when I use this camera that the show looks better than it does at other times, and I think it looks a lot better too. I love using this camera, but it is significant overkill for the type of stuff that I do, and a lot of the times I don't use it. When I'm going out and doing my barrio walks, I don't want to carry something so large. This is a full camera that you have to, I'm on a tripod. This is a lot of stuff. If I want to take this moving and keep it stable, I have to have a big DJI Ronin gimbal system to keep it still. This is just, it's complicated and potentially expensive. This is not outrageously expensive, but it's a big investment that someone needs to make, and a lot of research and learning how to use the camera. Now, if you already have a camera, you already know how to use it, great. Feel free to use those things, but don't feel that it's something you have to do. For most people, most YouTubers, all you need is one of these. Now, this is an iPhone, but an Android's going to work fine for you too. Pretty much every phone maker puts enough camera into their phones that is all you need for a pretty successful channel. Even the most successful channels will once in a while be using these phones. Now, I have an iPhone 13 and I shoot a number of episodes with it. Fewer now than I used to, but I still do quite a few, and I use it for a lot of my supplementary footage, such as when we're out at a club or a restaurant. I don't want to carry a bunch of camera gear most times. I want to be able to just grab a little bit of what show is going on, or what food we have, or the ambiance or whatever, and I use this and it looks great. This records in 4K. For most of you looking to do shows, unless you're specifically doing a show that requires scenery, you can probably make do with a 1080p or HD image, and that will work just fine. In many cases, even large professional shows that are filming all the time and have lots of expensive gear still film in 1080p because it gives them an easier workflow. They can store more of their originals. They can always upscale it at the last second when they go to publish, and they can even get software like Topaz that allows them to upscale it even more. It's not necessarily something you want to do. Working in 1080p the whole way is absolutely fine for most use cases. Like, people overthink how much high quality image is going to make a difference for them. As long as you have good content, most shows, yes, they benefit from a better image, but most people are not watching on a 4K monitor. Most of them are not watching the 4K feed from YouTube, and many people can't. They don't have enough bandwidth to do so. A lot of people are watching on their phones, often in a vertical format, often on their cell plan. And when you do that, it doesn't matter. You're not going to, 720p would look absolutely fine if delivered well. So worry more about getting something filmed, and then worry about how you're filming long before you worry about your cameras. So start, if this is all you have, start with this. Don't let the camera hold you back. Just get started. But here's a quick tip. Your first video, yeah, just turn on your camera and look and watch yourself on the screen. Do this a bit. It's going to help you learn what you look like on the screen, what different things you do affect how the video looks. It's a good educational experience. But for those of us who've done this for a while, we switched to using the real camera. These look a lot better. They have better light performance, better resolution. They just look better, and they have a faster lens in most cases, so you're able to get just a better looking environment, not to this degree of background blur, but they start to get more background blur. They just look more crisp, more natural. Trust me, professionals do this all the time. When you're filming a movie, nobody uses the front-facing camera to do that. They use the back-facing camera. When you're taking pictures that you really care about, you always use that back camera. So do the same for your show. Just that one tip to use your camera better, it's gonna make a big difference. Also, unless you're intentionally recording at 1080p, your iPhone or anything like it will record at 4K. Some of them will record in 8K. You may not want to go all the way to 8K, but at least turn it up to like 4K and get that footage, unless you decide you intentionally don't want to. Again, I said 1080p is fine. It'll work for a lot of use cases. But you also probably have 4K at the ready and just decide to use it if that's what you want to do. And if your camera is native 4K, like the iPhone is today, it's going to look better in 4K than it does in 1080p. People who are going to watch your show in 1080p, let YouTube bring it down to that it'll do the scaling when they do their processing online. You don't have to do that for them. Give them a beautiful 4K video, and they'll take care of the rest. Now, moving on from that, so you have a phone, maybe it doesn't meet your needs, maybe you want to move on to something else, maybe you want more flexibility. Trust me, I know. I do a lot of filming, and if I did everything with my phone, that would cause a lot of problems. My phone needs to charge at certain times. I need it ready for when I'm traveling. I have to use it for other things. I'm taking a video right now, and I need to be able to show it and talk about it. That makes it difficult to use this as my only device. And it's a lot more limited in things like attaching microphones, having just a variety of shooting, whatever. And if you're like me and I shoot in a lot of dangerous areas, I don't shoot where my life is in danger, I shoot where my camera is in danger. Meaning it is a very high likelihood that someone could grab my camera and run with it. My phone is worth a lot of money, both because it's a phone and because it's got all my data on it. So it's worth a lot of money to me because the disruption to my life would be significant. But I have had my camera stolen before, not by someone grabbing it from me, but simply someone grabbing it through a window out of a hotel room. But because it wasn't my phone, because it was my GoPro, this was not a big deal. I lost maybe 1 or 2 videos that were on it at the time, and I was simply able to buy another GoPro and replace it and move on. That would not have been the case had it been at my iPhone. It would have been a tragedy, and I would have been spending weeks trying to figure out how to put my life back together. I would have, but it would have been much more expensive and much more impactful. My GoPro, I just fell back to using my cell phone until I got my GoPro replaced. Not a big deal. For those who are wondering, it was my GoPro 9, my first GoPro 9, my second one I still use all the time for the channel. Now, that brings us to the GoPro. GoPro and other action cams, such as those made by Insta360 and by DJI, can be really good tools for when you want to move beyond your cell phone. Now, this is important to note. The cell phones, by and large, especially the iPhone, will produce a better video than most of the GoPro footage. So this may feel like a step backwards, and in many cases it actually is. Your iPhone and many other cell phones will have autofocus and a lot of processing power and some really expensive sensors. You're basically looking at $1,000 camera. The GoPro, on the other hand, is a $400 to $500 camera with a fixed focus. And you may say, wow, that's a big step backwards. Why would I want to potentially do that? Especially given that, like, the iPhone has high definition, high dynamic range color, whereas the GoPros generally do not. They do now with the 11 have 10-bit color at least. So with the GoPro and other action cams, one of the advantages is actually that fixed focus. It is tough for us vloggers who are doing FaceTime like I'm doing right now because their focus is in the background, not on the face. That means that the background is always crystal clear and our faces are just a little bit blurry. Now, if I step back like this far, you won't notice, but if I get up really nice and close, here I'm crystal clear and the background is just, whoa, you can't see anything. With the GoPro, I'd be the thing getting blurry. Not so blurry that you can't figure out what's going on, but it doesn't handle close-ups well. And even at arm's length, it's not the best. If you're at, like, say, 2 or 3 times arm length, then it can look really good. You would never notice the focus problems because it's designed to get most everything in focus. It's an action cam. The advantages to something like the GoPro are, one, it is extremely easy to use. I'm talking about all action cams. I'm not singling out the GoPro. It's what I use, and it's the leader in the industry. So it's very easy to use. If you're feeling that the phone gives you too many options, or there's just too much going on, getting something like a GoPro, putting in a few one-time settings, such as setting it to 4K video, 30 frames per second, high bit rate recording, 10-bit color. You do a few of those things one time. Just sit down, put in your settings, and you're done. Every time you pick up the camera, just hit record and you're good to go. You don't have to worry about focus, and you don't have to worry about things like focus breathing. Right now, if I step slightly off center, it's going to give you the background and I go out of focus. Now, I'm intending to do that right now, but what if that was an accident? That could cause a problem with your video, and if you're doing a lot of movement, that could cause a lot of problems with your video. With the GoPro, that's never going to happen. You can swing the camera around, get in and out of picture, move forward and back really quickly. You don't have to worry about how the focus is going to respond or what it's going to focus on. That makes filming a lot easier, especially if you're doing it on your own. The workflows can also be extremely easy. Now, the iPhone, for example, does have some really nice workflows if you're working with a Mac desktop, that you can airdrop stuff directly to the desktop, but I've had that completely break down on me and create situations where I could not get my videos off of my phone. That's a problem. I don't have that problem with the GoPro. In the worst case scenario, I pop out my SD card, put it into a reader, copy the files, and I'm done. But the GoPro specifically offers online workflows. I'm able to pay for a cloud service from GoPro and have it upload automatically. Many of you know that's what I do for this show. All of my footage, even that coming from my Olympus or my iPhone, all gets uploaded to GoPro's cloud, and then I download it from there to work with it. So I have a central location backing everything up and storing all of my files. For me, totally worth it, and I use GoPros most of the time, and they do it automatically. All I have to do is plug in my GoPro to charge, and it's going to charge my battery and upload whatever footage I did for the day all at once. And the new GoPro 11 even then cleans up the SD card for me. I don't even have to do that manually. My older 9 I still have to do manually. But in both cases, really, really easy. And for me, with 2 completely separate network connections at home with 2 different Wi-Fis, I have them set to different Wi-Fis so they can both upload completely independent of each other on different networks, so I get all the bandwidth of 2 separate networks to upload. There's a lot of cool workflow stuff that the GoPro makes easy for me. So for a lot of people, if you're looking to do this all the time, you're not just experimenting, your first couple shows, don't go out and buy a camera unless you just don't care about spending the money. We really want to own that camera, right? If buying cameras is what's going to motivate you, okay, like, I get it. I love getting cameras, and the show makes it that much easier to justify because I'm using different cameras all day, every day. Okay, I get that 100%. If buying a GoPro is what motivates you to do your show, motivate yourself. But don't feel that you need to do that. I recommend getting started with what you have making sure that you have a formula that you think is going to work, you have a path forward, you know you're going to do it, then start buying cameras that make sense for you. The GoPro can be a really useful tool in your repertoire. For me, it's what I use most of the time, but most of the time I'm out in environments where I need to hand hold, I'm looking at the camera, and I need it to be pretty rough and ready all the time. The GoPros are also able to go underwater. They're waterproof. My brain completely stopped there. And so you can take them out in any weather conditions. You can go out on a boat. You can drop them in the ocean. You can do all kinds of things. They're really small. It's easy to get mounts for them. So if you want to do action things like mount them to a car, mount them to a bicycle handle, there's so many different scenarios where a GoPro is going to be really handy. You can get head mounts, chest mounts. I will mount them to my head and record myself walking the dogs. I have one set up in a window right now, recording me recording this. Now it's a time lapse, so who knows if you'll even see me. But that makes it really easy to do lots of things all the time. And for me, having multiple GoPros is a really valuable thing. Even if it wasn't my main camera, which it is, it's a great addition to my repertoire of cameras. So for me, the first thing I needed was my at the time it was a Samsung, then a OnePlus, now I'm on the iPhone, and I've always had a GoPro, right? I started with the 4, then the 5, then a 9, then another 9, now the 11, plus a 9. And that really gave me this variety of footage. I can use the iPhone for one thing, the GoPro for another, and then I moved up to having the Olympus, the full, really professional, amazing, mirrorless, with all the bells and whistles and expensive lenses and interchangeable lenses and just so many options. That looks like this, right? And then there's other tools that are really interesting as well. Consider something like a 360 cam may be really useful for you. They're harder to use. You're going to have a much more difficult workflow. So this is different than using like the GoPro, where you're going to have a really, really simple workflow and you can just have this tiny thing, pull it out, and know you're just point. It's going to give you great footage, right? It doesn't handle low light well. That's what this is for. But it does handle shaky situations and impromptu situations, and because it has amazing built-in digital stabilization, you don't have to carry very much, and it's going to take care of a lot of things that for other people on other platforms you may get poorer footage. The new iPhone 14 starts to have some of that stabilization, but nothing like the GoPro does. The iPhone 13, like I use, does not. So if I'm shaky, it's shaky. But the GoPro, I can go, I can even spin it upside down and you'll never know. It is rock solid all the way around, right? Now, if I spin it in a circle this way, that's going to be different. But that's a big piece of where filming with a GoPro can make getting started, just pick up and record, so much easier. And it's easy to mount on a tripod too and use it that way. You just have a lot of options at very low cost and very low effort, very low learning curve. Now, the 360 cams give you this absolutely everything. They film everything around them. And again, no focus, right? They're always focused at infinity, but you can just film, hold it out on a stick, film everything, and edit it later. That means a lot more work in editing, but a lot more possibility in editing. Generally, at least currently, 360 cams are not going to meet the image quality that you get from like a regular GoPro or other action cam. Definitely not the image quality of this, but they can have some pretty good image quality, and there's so many unique, interesting things that you can do with those tools that it could easily be worth it for you to have in your repertoire. For me, it's on my list. I don't have one yet, but I plan on getting one because there's a lot of things I want to do with it, and I think it'll be a lot of fun, both because I want to do interesting new shots for the show here, but also because I want to do a 360 channel where I'm showing complete environments and giving people kind of a way to be immersive in those environments when you have a VR headset or other tool for looking at that kind of 3D footage. That's a tool that a lot of YouTubers who have a little bit of time, not those who are pressed for time, but those who are willing to put in and get past the learning curve, find to be a really valuable addition. Not very many people are going to go to just a 360 cam, but you could, because they're good enough that you can make your show look good with just that. But chances are it's only going to be a supplemental cam. Another type of camera that you may seriously want to consider is something like the DJI Pocket series. These are really itty-bitty travel cameras that are designed for more like what I do. And I do plan on getting one of these as well. These are full 4K or better, really nice cameras that give some really nice images, have that autofocus, much like your phone will. So it's kind of like taking a phone image, but moving it up to a bigger sensor in most cases, and then attaching it to a physical gimbal. By doing that, you're having a lot of the advantages you have with the phone, but also the advantages you have with something like the GoPro with the stabilization, but taking it to another level where it's an entire gimbal. So you get a better image quality, because the digital stabilization in the GoPros, while amazing, does limit its image quality. It requires a bigger sensor that you're not using all of. We won't get into why that is here, but these types of cameras can give you a really nice step up at very low effort, but still more effort than the GoPro. A pure action camera is going to be your easiest thing to do and can make some really good results. Watch my show. The majority of my episodes are shot on the GoPro and nothing else, and they look really good. People don't say that doesn't look good, but when I shoot with this, they do go, ooh, I really like that creamy background. I love how good the colors are just that spot on. Yes. But with the GoPro, you can get some really amazing images, especially in bright light, that people will say, this looks excellent, I don't care. Like, I don't need anything better than this. And that's enough to build your channel, right? Once you're doing this a lot, you're not going to need my advice on how to do this. It's going to be easy. But when you're just starting out, when you're learning how to do these things, having some tools that are easy to use and getting to a point where you're comfortable with them, it's going to make a big difference. So those are the main ones: your phone, an action cam, a 360 cam, something like the Pocket, and then going to a full-blown mirrorless with interchangeable lenses. Those are your 5 main categories of cameras. And while I love using a mirrorless, I love having that big expensive image with the big sensor and all the different glass that I can put on it, I would not move to that until you were really, really ready. All of those cameras, any one of them, can produce an amazing YouTube channel for you. Maybe having multiple, growing over time, but most importantly, use what you have. Get started. Don't let the lack of whatever camera it is you think you want hold you back from starting your channel. Start with what you have, learn what you need to learn, get better at using the camera. You will learn how you use cameras, and that was a big piece for me. This kind of camera is what I love using, but I almost never use it because I can't use it in the scenarios where I tend to film. That's a big deal. If I was shooting a different channel, if I was doing studio work all the time, this is the only thing I would ever use. But because I'm normally doing field work and doing walks in outdoor environments, often in big cities and places where I need to be able to throw things in my pocket. I need to be able to turn on and off. I need to carry it often for hours at a time. And I can't get all sweaty. I can't be whacking it into things. It would be too delicate. I need an action cam that can handle whatever weather comes, whatever happens, long recording, lots of batteries in my pockets. I got to have that flexibility. That's what works for me. And I didn't expect that when I started the channel. I started with other equipment thinking different things would matter. So that is our talk about cameras. The one last thing I'm going to mention about this is your gray card. This is one of the best investments that you can make, and I'm going to show one to you right now. All right, what we have here is a gray card, or in this case, a white card. They come in neutral colors like white and gray. You can get much more expensive ones that have an entire palette of very carefully controlled colors. That's for experts, and they're expensive. Those are generally in excess of $100, and they're a big thing to carry around. You have to take very close care of them. But a gray or white card like this is just a few dollars. I think I spent about $8 for a pack of 3 of these, black, gray, and white. This is plastic. I can just put it in my pocket. I don't have to worry about ruining it. It's easy to clean, and if anything was to happen to it, it's very cheap to replace. That is one of the best things you will ever use in doing videography. It is such a cheap thing, and I'm going to show you right now what it looks like. So everything you've been seeing has been shot using this to do color balance, and now we're going to switch to it without. It still looks okay. The Olympus does an amazing job of colors. It's considered one of the best, if not the best, color science in the entire photographic industry. It's fantastic. But giving that perfect white to work with allows any system, whether it's the camera itself or our editing software later, which we're going to talk about in just a minute, to adjust knowing where neutral is. And if you don't have that, you have to either ignore it and just trust the camera, which is okay, it won't look bad, but using that allows you to up your game on color across the board. You can use it with a phone, you can use it with a GoPro, you can use it with any camera. It's such a cheap thing. Trust me, it is one of my favorite tools to have. And we're not going to show how to use it in this show, but very, very easy in any editing software or in most cameras. You just show it, tell it, this is what my neutral looks like, and it adjusts everything based on that. It doesn't change your colors, it just fixes where it's drifted from neutral, and it will look so much better so much of the time. Highly, highly recommend it. It changed how I film in so many cases, and when you guys started saying, wow, the show looks so much better, that was one of the things that made that difference. All right, our next topic, because of that, is right on to the editing software. How do we edit these shows? Let's find out. Next up on our list of topics is editing software. This is one of the biggest decisions that you're going to need to make, and one of the things that people tend to overlook until it's a bit later, and then they're scrambling to do research. When I got started, I actually did so without any software at all, and this worked out okay. I did all of my shots straight onto a cell phone, and I uploaded them directly to YouTube. I did no editing at all. For me, this works, but I'm a person who gets up and does conference talks without any preparation. I can just start talking, and for the most part, that works for me. If you're making short form and you're able to really carefully control your start, your stop, keep the camera controlled the whole time, and never have to edit anything, okay, that works fine. As I'm doing this, my dog is literally tearing apart a bush next to me and ripping the branches off. But for most people, and once you get to any traffic on your channel, you're going to need to be editing. So we need to talk about the software that you're going to use, and that also means we're going to have to talk about the hardware that you're going to use as well. So let's start with a few options. There's basically two major categories. There's the completely free open source world of video editing software, and it can be pretty good. And then there's the paid world. There's a little bit of crossover there. We're going to mention that. And that may be where you want to be, because that can be a great place. But let's start with the completely free, because this is kind of an ideal place for you to start on your own journey. In the world of free and open source software, we've got a number of options. Some of those options include Kdenlive, OpenShot, Shotcut, Flowblade, and so forth. These are completely free. They're open source. They're available typically for any platform. One or two of them may be limited, such as Flowblade, which is only available on Linux, but Shotcut and OpenShot, for example, are available on Mac, on Windows, and on Linux. So you can use any type of hardware that you like. You can switch between them anytime that you like. You can share with your friends, have different people who work with your workflow, and never do you have to pay for any of these ever. They are completely free all the time. They are free for every version. They're free into the future. They're free for old versions. They're free on every platform. Free, free, free. That makes for a great spot to start, because you're not making an investment and you're not feeling like you're trapped with your decision. You get to test things out and move on if you like. For me, I got started with OpenShot. I found it to be very easy to get started. I understood it well, and I was able to do a lot of what I needed without too much of a problem. I liked it a lot. However, I found that there were things I wanted to do that were difficult, and I also found that its workflow was very different from other software that I looked at. So I eventually switched to using a combination of Flowblade, which I like a lot, but has lost a lot of momentum in the industry, partially because it's a very small team making it, and they're on hiatus, and they only make for Linux, so most people that I know couldn't try it out. And Shotcut. And Shotcut is what I eventually gravitated to as the main tool that I use when I'm using an open source free product. I like Shotcut a lot. It feels like Apple's Final Cut Pro. It does a beautiful job and gives a lot of power, but it's not a bad learning curve. I do feel that OpenShot is easier to learn initially, but really quickly you'll find, I think, Shotcut to be a more advanced editor that was only the tiniest bit harder to learn, and once you've learned it, you have more at your fingertips to work with. With all of the open source editors that I've worked with, what I found was that it was very difficult to find third-party components to work with them. That is not necessarily a big deal. If that's not something that you're going to do, then that doesn't matter at all. But if it is something that you plan to do or end up wanting to do, then you're going to find that those things may have held you back to some degree. That may be a problem. That's what happened to me. I was using Shotcut and found that there were all these resources that other YouTubers were using commonly, and they were not available to me. That made a big gap in what I was doing, and I found that I was putting in a lot of effort to do really simple things and having a lot of things that I just didn't have that I wanted. When I started, it was not a big deal, right? I got my first videos out. I did my first series of videos, did it with just Shotcut and OpenShot, and it worked fine. I didn't spend any money. I learned what I was doing. Then I was able to make decisions later, knowing a lot more. So I like that approach, and I recommend that you may want to consider that. That can work really well. So if you're getting started and don't want to spend any money, but you don't want it to be too hard, Shotcut is really a place that I recommend taking an initial peek. It works on every platform, including native on the Apple M hardware like the M1 and M2, which a lot of people will be like, oh, I can get this for Apple, and then find out it doesn't run natively on that. They have to run it in an emulator, and while it works in those tools in Rosetta Stone, it's not as ideal. If it runs native, it's going to be faster, and it means the developers are keeping up with that platform. So Shotcut is really, really good for that. I have also found, as I've moved on from Shotcut, that there are still times that I go back and use Shotcut. Sometimes it just has some power that other tools, much more expensive tools, don't have. So it's still in my arsenal. I just use it less and less as time goes on, but I do use it, and I plan on keeping it, and I keep recommending it. Now, of paid tools, you basically have three big players. There's lots and lots of tiny little paid players that I have no idea why anyone would consider. The professionals aren't talking about them. No one's using them. I wouldn't give them a second thought. Of the three main ones, you have DaVinci Resolve. This one's important to note. Even though it's $300 to purchase, there is a free version. Feel free to go download the free version and try it out. Maybe it's enough for you. The thing about DaVinci Resolve is that it is a professional editing a suite of software. It is very big and very hard to learn compared to, say, Shotcut. So while it's free, you may find it overwhelming and very taxing on your computer. So it may be worth not learning it as a first tool unless you know you're going to be really serious and you really want to learn a great workflow. It may not be a place to start, but it is available in a free version, so it is something you can just download and start playing with today, right? Everything we've mentioned so far, you can download and play with today, no questions, no matter what kind of computer you have, just get started. DaVinci Resolve is even available on the iPad. So even if you're on just an iPad, you're like, I don't have a computer, but what editing software can I use? DaVinci Resolve is your option. Get it now, ask no more questions. If you're on a computer, if you're on a Mac, you also have the option of Final Cut Pro. This is about $300. There is a free trial version that you can use for a little bit. It is a lot like Shotcut, but it has a lot more power, and of course, it runs on all Apple hardware native. And the other option is Adobe Premiere Pro. In just a couple years, we have gone from Premiere Pro being what every professional YouTuber I saw always said they used, with a few exceptions saying they used Final Cut, and being like apologists, right? I use Final Cut. Oh, sorry, that's what I use. This is what I teach, whatever. And they would act like it was a second-tier citizen. And no one talked about DaVinci at all, and the open source ones are basically never talked about. Today, that has flipped dramatically, and Premiere Pro is now persona non grata. Absolutely no one talks about it, except in the context of whatever happened to Premiere Pro. Why does everyone suddenly hate it? And the answer is basically it didn't do anything to keep itself in the advanced. It doesn't run on all platforms, so it's really limiting, and its price is beyond imagination. It is so outrageously expensive, and many people don't consider it to be as good, or at least any better, than Final Cut, DaVinci, or possibly some others. So from what we've seen in the industry, some places, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more with third-party components, but Motion VFX, for example, who is an extremely large and influential third-party component maker, now only makes for Final Cut and DaVinci. They don't make for the open source ones, which I'm sad about, but they don't have the frameworks for that, and they only occasionally make for Premiere Pro. So all of the really cool tooling that we're finding in the industry is mostly going to Final Cut and DaVinci. Those two get it every time. They share common pricing structures. They share common user bases. Those two have taken off, with DaVinci taking the majority of Premiere Pro's market. DaVinci is made by Blackmagic, who is a major maker of hardware for the film industry. So these are people who really know what they're doing. And Apple, of course, has deep pockets and really knows what they're doing with the hardware. The two of them have a lot of reason to be making this software. For Adobe, they're just a software maker, which could mean good things, and they do traditionally make very good software, but they do so at a price point that is simply completely different than everyone else in the industry. They charge more per year for access to their software than perpetual licenses are for the other platforms. And only Final Cut Pro, of anyone that's considered serious, even requires that you pay. DaVinci has a free option. So if you pay for Final Cut and DaVinci, they're only $300. Adobe is closer to $600 per year. So you need to have a lot of additional value to justify even looking at it. So if it's not something that you know you need for some reason, I would take it right off the list. It's not worth looking at. Mostly DaVinci Resolve is going to be your main option because it has that free tier, and because at $300 or $295 available on multiple platforms, it does like everything. It is one of the most powerful platforms you can possibly have. You can make full-blown movies with it, and people do. That's probably where you want to be today. I use Final Cut Pro at this point. I have Apple hardware specifically for it. I made that investment for that purpose. I tested the two together and made the decision that the new Apple M1 hardware at the time, 2 years ago, and now the M2 hardware is so fantastic that that's what I was going to use. And that meant I was going to be using Shotcut or Final Cut, because at that time, DaVinci was not yet releasing Apple M1 compatible native software. And still, I can't get that. They are available on Apple, but it's using Rosetta Stone. So it should be coming soon, but it's 2 years lagging on that hardware. So on the hardware that I'm using for this, I'm not an Apple person, right? I would prefer Ubuntu Linux on AMD hardware most of the time. But for this, I find that Final Cut Pro does such a phenomenal job. It is so easy to use and works so well on that native hardware that it is the perfect option for me. And at $300, I think that it's a really good investment. I did use the free trial to try it out. I did learn OpenShot, Shotcut, Flowblade, had played a little bit with DaVinci Resolve free, and had touched a few other tools all before I went to Final Cut. So I really had a feel for what I wanted and liked before I did it. But going to Final Cut, I've been very happy. And the biggest thing, now we're going to talk about it, is third-party components. I looked at, when I was using Shotcut, I'm like, I need titles, I need lower thirds, I need all these things that happen on the screen. Those things need to come from somewhere. I'm not a graphic artist. I do not have the time to go out and build those components. I want to buy them. And this is what YouTubers do. And this is one of the biggest secrets of YouTubers, is buying these third-party components that give you that subscribe button, that give you this beautiful title, that give you this cool map thing that folds out. Watch my channel. I don't do a ton. I say that, maybe you think it is. Everything that happens on the screen is a third-party component. I don't do any of them natively. I don't have Apple's tool for making that. You can go get that if that's something you're interested in. You can make your own. You can do the same thing on Shotcut. If you want to make them, if you want to make them and sell them, there's a market for that. Go do that. People are looking for that, right? But unless that's what you want to do, you need to get them from a third party, and that's what most of us do. And by getting third party ones, you have this world of pre-built options, and some of them are really powerful. I primarily use Motion VFX. I am not sponsored by them, but I would like to be, just so you know. I buy just tons of their packages, and they vary from about, when I look for sales, I often get them between $39 and $50 per package. Sometimes I have to get more expensive ones, so like $70 to $80 at full price. They're kind of like $90 to $140, and they come loaded with different tools. It could be titles, lower thirds, things that work with your logos, different transition effects, all kinds of stuff. I use them extensively. I probably have something like 20 packs from them and plan to get many more as sales allow, and as they make sense and as they make new ones that work for me. They have tons that make no sense for my channel, so I don't use those. They also make coloring packs, all kinds of stuff. And they do it for both Final Cut and DaVinci Resolve. Some few select packs are also available for Premiere Pro, but if you're on Final Cut or DaVinci, you have access to massive libraries. Go to motionvfx.com. Go look around for something that you like and purchase it, play with it, and see how it works. You only have to start with one, see if it's something that you can use. I recommend, if you're just getting started, something like MTuber 2 or MTuber 3. These are general packs meant for general YouTubers, and they have a mix of different things so you can play with. Oh, I need a title. Oh, I've got something. I need something for my logo. I've got something. I need a transition. I've got something, right? It's not going to give you everything. And you know, all these tools, whether it's DaVinci or Final Cut Pro or whatever, they're going to come with some built in, but these packs will give you a lot more. Now, what I found was with like Shotcut, there were nothing. Just by going to Final Cut Pro, I got this giant library of Apple's own tools that they build in. They're mostly pretty simple, but there are a lot of them, and at least one of them I use on every single episode, which is the bar that comes across the bottom that shows my show logo and says what the title of the day is. That is not a Motion VFX. That is not a third party anything. That is a stock, straight from Apple, part of Final Cut Pro component. If that's all you need, you've got a lot of those to work with. But When you want to grow, you want to add additional things, for me, I find it very valuable. And I have a lot of channels, so I use different ones on different channels and different ones at different times. And I find Motion VFX to be very well supported and to have a lot of options. So when I go into one of their components, I can be like, oh, I want to change the font, I want to change the color, I want to change the behavior, and I can tweak it to be what's good for my channel. That stuff is really powerful, and that's why I moved away from the free tools over to Final Cut Pro. It gave me access to that, and that has really improved my show and eased my workflow. Instead of spending 30 minutes to an hour trying to get a title up, I can do it in 2 minutes. And it probably looks better and does more interesting things and grabs the audience's attention a little bit better. Those things are a big deal when you're making a show and trying to have audience retention. So that's something that is one of those secrets, just like the gray card, right? It doesn't take much to learn, but if you don't know that that's how people are doing it, you're going to be lost. How are these YouTubers making these beautiful shows with these interesting things, and they do it so quickly? How are they doing it? They're using tools like Final Cut Pro or DaVinci Resolve, and they're buying these third-party components when it makes sense. And some of them, if you go to Motion VFX, you're going to recognize some of them from some of your favorite channels, right? You're going to be like, oh, I've seen this exact effect, and I never thought about it before. This is where it comes from. I've seen a lot of those, so I have the same ones that a lot of other people do. And if you're watching a lot of YouTube, yeah, you'll notice, but not a big deal. And that's one of the reasons why I like having a lot of different packs, because I shake it up and you see lots of different ones, and sometimes I modify them, so it's a little bit harder to tell that it's a stock component from a third party, but I'm not hiding it. People know I'm not a graphic artist. I have to be buying them from somewhere, right? And that's what I'm doing. And that I find very exciting, right? Purchasing those third-party components has done a lot to make me enjoy making the show. I always enjoy doing the recording. I enjoy doing the color correction. I enjoy doing the editing. I enjoy all the pieces, especially buying the cameras. But having these third-party components, and I can pop up a subscribe button, I can put a link to something, I can make a note on the screen that's like, I forgot to say something, and boom, here's the information. All those things, they make me happy, especially that I can do it so easily. So that has made me just able to be the YouTuber that I am. I would never be able to do that if I had to do all that work myself, even if I was good at it, which I'm not. So, all right, coming up next, we're going to talk about, in the same way, we're going to talk about audio, and we're going to talk about music. In our next section, we're talking about audio. There's a lot of ways you can record the audio for your show, and this is a spot where a lot of people overlook what they're doing for the first long time until they're really used to doing the show, and it can be a really big challenge, especially if you're doing things outdoors like me. There's a lot of times you end up with wind noise, you can end up with poor recordings, or the audio levels are bad, and this takes a lot of work and a lot of learning, and this is something that a lot of people don't know intrinsically, so when they do it, they find that this is a very challenging area of YouTubing for them. So it's important to think about it before you get started. Now, of course, if you're starting with something like the iPhone, you're just going to, hold it and record, or you're going to put it on a selfie stick. The microphones are built in, and that's almost given. That's what you're going to use, and that can work just fine in many cases. But be aware, it's going to have a hard time struggling with wind noise and other things. So it depends on your setting, whether you have to isolate your voice or whatever. I've got a lot of sun going on here. I thought this would be a good spot to record, but it's a little bit of a challenge. But I also like the spot, so we're gonna keep pushing through. Maybe if I get a little bit closer and we get the extra blur. As you move forward, there's more things you can do to get better and better, and you're gonna have to play with what makes sense for your workflow. With a GoPro, and this is possibly the most important thing to discuss, you have the option of the media kit, and this, I would never use a GoPro without it. Now, if I'm shooting, if I'm sticking it on a surfboard or whatever, that's different. But if I'm actually just recording myself doing a vlog, then I need to have the media kit for the GoPro. It's about $100 add-on, but it gives you the option of having an external microphone, plus it gives you its own microphone that's a step up from the GoPro's built-in microphones. It gives you a wind filter, or a dead cat as they're called, and a lot of additional spots to hook things. It does a lot. It's basically a requirement if that's a tool that you're going to use. So I've always used one, and it works really well. I, at times, use the media kit microphone, but most of the time I move to a lavalier, which is one of these. This one, in fact, I get mine from Rode, but there's a lot of places you could get one that are perfectly fine. I happen to be a fan of Rode microphones. Using a lavalier means you're getting the voice much closer. You can do a lot more. You have a lot more flexibility as far as how you talk. You can also move in different directions, and your voice doesn't come and go. on-camera microphones like the Media Kit microphone or the built-in GoPros or the one on your phone or whatever, if you're not talking directly at it and if you're not close enough, you're not going to get that audio. So there's a lot of things you may have to think about there. There are new tools that are now available that are absolutely fantastic, such as the Rode Wireless Go 2 that gives you a wireless transmitter that hooks on your camera and talks to the camera and gives you something you can clip onto yourself that basically acts like a lavalier, or you can put handheld or whatever, and records wirelessly. So it's still recording to the camera, makes your life really easy, but lets you be flexible and move around over a large area and control your microphone. I use that sometimes. I love the Rode Wireless Go 2. It's fantastic. I highly recommend that. If that's a style of recording that you want to do, you can use a lavalier with that as well, and I often do. You can also so most of my shows, just for people who are watching it and you're wondering what I do, most of the time I'm using the Rode lavalier connected directly to the Media Kit of the GoPro 11. So it's recording as part of the show with the GoPro 11. It's all built in, but it is an external lavalier mic connected to the Media Kit. That makes the easiest workflow for me, and I don't have to have extra components. Because I'm handheld, I don't go farther than that wire is going to go, so it doesn't matter. Now, if I'm need to be more flexible and move around, I may go to the Wireless Go. I can mount it on the GoPro or on the Olympus or whatever, just not my iPhone, and I can move around over a very large area and use it on the wireless. And if I'm doing a multi-recording situation where I have a co-host, then that works great because we have two microphones that both transmit to the same receiver, and it mixes the audio directly and makes life really, really easy. So that I will use at times as well. But at times where I want the absolute best audio quality and the ultimate in flexibility, and sometimes just I don't want to worry about batteries, I use a Tascam digital recorder. And I showed this on the show the other day. I've used these for a while. This is my second one. I love these. This is a standalone audio recorder, so you can use it for all kinds of things. It's got built-in microphones, right? So it's really good for taking to concerts and recording things like that, but it also you can plug in. So I plugged in a lavalier because when I'm using these outside, we've noticed that there's a lot of noise and that's not ideal. But when I use the lavalier, people have mentioned how good it sounds. So this combination I love, but you're going to say, Scott, how do you make the audio and the video go together? Because wow, well, there are techniques to doing that in your editing software where you can learn to line those up. You can do things like you're clapping and using that audio to sync up, and then you just watch carefully. But it can have problems, and it can be a lot of work. It can be very time consuming. Because I use Final Cut Pro, it has some amazing tools for this. So I do a little bit of work on this end where I start and stop the video and the audio more or less together. And then when I go into Final Cut Pro, I select the video and the audio that go together and tell it that I want them synced up, and it creates a new clip that uses the audio from this lavalier and the Tascam and the video from the Olympus and puts them together as a single entity. And takes because I am recording on the Olympus as well, so it uses the matching audio to sync it up perfectly, but then it takes the audio from the Olympus away, because if I played the on camera for you, you'd say, that's not very, I mean, I can hear it, but it's not very good. And if I got far away, you'd be like, what are you even saying, right? But with this, you get absolutely crystal clear. It's beautiful audio with a big spectrum and a good microphone. All that is really awesome, and the amount of work for me is minimal. So I take all these clips and I put them together and tell it to sync them up, and it just processes them for a couple of minutes, and it's almost always spot on. And then I can merge all the clips together however I want separately and work with them from there. So those different recording techniques, whether you're using on-camera mics or upgraded on-camera mics, you can attach boom mics to your cameras, and those shotguns, those often work well, especially if you're doing like interviews, you don't have time to hand someone something. But I find that the lavaliers, whether it's a wireless clip-on or an actual lavalier that I connect to my collar, whether it's wireless or the Tascam in my pocket, those work best for me. They are giving me the best audio and very little extra work. But when I'm out and about walking with GoPro, I tend to just go straight on camera with the lavalier, keep it as easy as possible. I have done a lot of shotgun recording in the past, and it's fine, but you have to be more careful with it. You have less flexibility as far as how it's going to pick up audio. You can't get as far away. You still have to be directional. Your speaker, your host, can't completely move around, so you have to worry about some of those things in a way that you don't have to with the lavalier. So for me, this is vastly superior, but a lot of people go with the shotguns, and a lot of people have great success. Using the Tascam also allows me, or the Rode Wireless if I record directly to it, allow me to move. I have big trucks coming by. Hopefully they're not being picked up too much as I speak about microphones. They allow me to use many different cameras in my filming and have the audio stay exactly the same throughout the entire recording. Whereas if I'm recording directly to the camera and I switch cameras, you're going to get completely different processors and preamps, and it's going to sound very different. That's the garbage truck. So these can give you a lot of flexibility. Again, start with what's simple and move on to things that are not overloading investments, that are not too hard for you. But be aware, these are the things that people are using. And like the Rode Wireless 2, there's competitors from like DJI and Small Rig now that are also very good. You have lots of options out there in almost all of these spaces. The other part of audio is the add-in audios that you will use when you're not recording yourself, but you're using audio from another source, such as music or sound effects. Now, these generally, you're not going to go out and record your own music, maybe, but not normally. And you can make your own sound effects, but again, not normally. You need to get these from a service. I actually use 2 services. Most people do not do that. I find that I really enjoy having access to these, and I use them extensively. And while I don't put music in every episode, I really like having the variety that the 2 services together gives me. The one that I started with is Artlist. It's about $200 a year. I think I pay $199 a year, and that gives me access to their entire music catalog. I can use it across as many channels as I want, and I do not get the sound effects from them. So it's just music, but it gives me a large library of music that I enjoy a lot. I really like the music that they have, and I can use it absolutely anywhere on my YouTube channels. So that for me is a big deal. And the other service that I use is Epidemic Sound, and they are definitely the bigger player in the industry. In the YouTube space, you're going to find so many people talking about Epidemic. You will find people talking about Artlist, but Epidemic is the bigger player. With Epidemic, I get the music and the sound effects. So any sound effects you hear on the channel, which I don't use too much, that's where they're coming from. The music could be coming from either. I use them both all the time, but a major difference is with a standard Epidemic subscription, I only get access to a single channel. Epidemic is more expensive than Artlist, but you get the sound effects all the time. With Artlist, I'm able to opt for just music, which I use all the time and almost never sound effects, so that works for me. Anytime I'm on a channel that isn't this one, it's the Artlist music that I'm using. Only on here am I using Epidemic, although I'm about to change that as I have some projects moving forward that need more options. With Artlist, it's really simple. I just opt for the use multiple channels option and pay for that. Done. With Epidemic, I have to go to a commercial one and put in business information. A little bit more complicated to move up to the multi-channel, but I'm about to do that, and I will let you know if there's any complications with that. But that should be happening soon. You can get multi-channel where you buy each channel at a time. It's a little bit whatever. But both of them give you giant music catalogs, and I find it a lot of fun going through and finding music to put on the channel. Sometimes I just like using them as my music service, right? Instead of going into Apple Music or whatever, I'll go to Epidemic or Artlist and just listen to that music, because it's something that there's like no chance you've heard it on the radio, right? But it's really high quality, curated music in a million different styles. So I can be like, I just want some country, I just want some bluegrass, I just want some, Latin lounge, I want some, whatever, ambient background, whatever. All that's in there. Just select different things, select different lengths and different speeds. And this can add a lot to your channel. It's amazing how much people expect there to be music, and you may not realize that that's a gap that you have. Now, I also find that if I play music while I'm talking, that instantly I get a bunch of feedback. Oh, I wish you wouldn't do that. I can't really hear you as well. Why is there music in the background? There's no need for it. So be careful when you use it, because it is often overused. But if I then do a scene where I'm just showing the garden and playing some music, everybody says, oh, I like that. Right? Some people are like, I just want to hear you talk. Some people are like, I don't want to hear you talk. I just want to see that beautiful scenery. But they never say the music's bad. They always say, I like having music in these images. So it's an important tool. And the sound effects, it's amazing how often professional YouTubers are using them. Watch professional YouTubers, people that you find successful, that you enjoy watching, and pay attention. Chances are you're going to hear music, you're going to see the third-party effects like I was talking about, and you're going to hear sound effects on everything. When a title comes up, you're going to hear a whoosh. When something happens, it's going to click or ding, or someone's going to be pouring coffee. That's not the sound of the coffee, that's a sound effect that they added in so they could control exactly what it sounded like and tweak it with the rest of the environment. That's how people are doing it, and that stuff makes a big difference. Sound design is a big part of successful YouTubing. Now, I'm a talking head, and I'm showing locations that I am, so adding in sound is not very often appropriate, but for most YouTubers, it's something that you're going to want to do quite a bit. And so those are very powerful tools. Both of those services, I don't recommend necessarily getting both services like I do. I do have a lot of channels, I do a lot of different things, and it's something I enjoy. So that's why I do it. But both services are excellent. I recommend either one. So it's artlist.io or epidemicsound.com. I believe for the Artlist, I'm paying $199 per year, and what I'm about to switch to for Epidemic is $218 per year. Going to annual on both of them is very big deal for savings, but you can go monthly to learn if you like the service or not, so don't be afraid to do that. With Epidemic, you can get started for $15 a month, and then when you go annual, it drops to $9 a month, so I believe it's $108 for the whole year if you're only doing one channel. And one channel means one YouTube, one Instagram, one TikTok. Like, you get different things, but you don't get to have like a lot of YouTube channels like I have. That's why I need a more expensive subscription and why it's more than double the cost, because I'm going to use more than double the channels. With Artlist, it's similar, but I don't know the numbers, but it's all lower. Not a lot lower. They're similar costs, but it's a little bit lower. So you're not looking at huge investments, especially if you go to the year and it only breaks down to like $9 or less per month to have access to music and sound effects. It's such an improvement to your channel. It's so incredibly worth it. That's where the dollars often should go pretty early, long before you're buying really amazing cameras, before you're getting really amazing sound equipment, before you're just upgrading all these different little things. You're going to want to spend money on the sound, on the third-party components, those things, because they add that polish that you're wondering how you can get to. All right, our next section, we're going to be talking about lighting, which this a great time to talk about it right here. I'm hearing this terrible dappled, bright, dark light going on as the sun goes down through the garden leaves. We're going to talk about lighting, because a lot of you are going to need to be able to film in darkness. You're going to need to be able to film while home. You're going to need to be able to film at night. And lighting is going to be something very important. But before we go on to that, I'm just going to mention some things that are also overlooked by a lot of people are things like tripods and quick release mounts. There's a lot of these little things that are not super expensive, but can make a huge difference. And I've noticed that YouTubers who are successful have a lot of these, and they're really thinking about them as a major part of their investment. And people who are just dabbling in YouTube are often missing these things because it's just not a thing they think about. They think, it's just a luxury. I don't need that. But that's one of the things that people are using to get where they go. One of those on the expensive side is a gimbal. This was really popular. Now it's not nearly as popular as it was. Kind of, it's been overdone, and there's digital ways to kind of compensate for not having one. So professional gimbals have fallen by the wayside to some degree, but also everyone seems to have one. So when you need it, it can be a great tool. I have one for my phone, and I have a big one for my good cameras. So I have the option of using it all the time. I have multiple tripods. I love using tripods. I'm using one right now. I use one for about half of my shooting. Basically, if you don't see me out walking, I'm on a tripod, and it allows me to be more animated. It allows me to just set up and not worry about things. And part of using my tripods well is I have Falcon F38 quick release equipment on all of them, so my cameras just slide on and off really fast. I can switch things up and keep it really, really nice and agile. I love that kind of stuff. Those things have made my life so much easier, and I have really nice camera bags, which if you watch my other show, Camera Cafe, I talk about bags and tripods and that kind of stuff. I have a small sling bag for when I just need to be on the go. I have all kinds of clips for my GoPro so I can have cameras while I'm doing stuff, chest mount, hat mount, whatever. I have multiple tripods. I have big bags. I have like shoulder bags, sling bags, big backpack bags, bags that are weatherproof, bags that aren't, bags that I just use for storage to keep my stuff clean. I have lots of that kind of equipment, which isn't really all that exciting generally, can be the stuff that really makes a difference. It just makes your life easier. Also lots of batteries, all those kinds of things. Neutral density filters, the little things. Make sure that your equipment is working properly rather than replacing it with more and more expensive equipment without getting the little things dialed in. All right, now we're gonna go talk about lighting. And finally, we come to lighting. This is one of the most overlooked, or possibly the most overlooked aspect of anything you're going to be doing when you're recording for YouTube. People who are doing YouTube quite often don't come from a professional lighting and camera and photography and videography background. And this is a spot where in general, when talking to the populace, people don't talk about lighting. It's boring, it's difficult to explain, and there's a lot of nuances to it, and it requires a lot of experience and training and research, and it's a spot where we all struggle. As you can see, my lighting is only so-so, but it's not the worst. This is a spot where you're going to want to, one, take some time and get an education. Watch videos and see what looks good and what doesn't. Go on YouTube and specifically look up lighting tutorials. You'll learn quite a bit very quickly. There's some things you can do to make your life very easy. For example, using natural light. You can go, whether you're inside, record by a window during the day and use that sunlight. Or go outside and record in a covered area, or go completely outside. All these things you'll see that I do on my channel quite a bit because I like using natural light and it's inexpensive. It also provides an opportunity for some beautiful backgrounds, and that can be really nice as well. Learning to use small changes in camera angle or placement, or where you're placing your model or whatever it is you're filming, can make a giant difference in what your video looks like. I'm standing in the same place, but I move the camera around. Now, of course, my background is very different, so you have to worry about that as well, but the lighting on my face is dramatically different. Little things like this, using natural light and just paying attention to how your lighting is working, can make all the difference on your video. A poorly lit video is difficult to watch and difficult to color correct. It's just, there's a lot of challenges with it. But if you're doing a little bit of effort, if you're thinking about where the light is, and you'll notice on my show when I'm walking around, I'm constantly talking about, well, we're going to show this because that's where the light is. It's because I'm paying attention to the light, and because I'm filming outdoors in live settings, I have very limited control. And so I have to choose whether I'm filming myself or what I'm looking at. Filming the direction or choosing the direction that I'm walking often is based on the light at the time. That's all things you have to consider. The thing that many people overlook is the ability to use open windows. Natural light during the day that is not direct often provides a really good opportunity if you're filming yourself, which is common for a vlog. If you're outdoors filming a location like I am, of course, you have to live with what you have. It's also important that nobody ever understands just how bright you need it to be. Your camera wants a lot of light. The more light you have to work with, the better you can make your image, basically. So even on a cloudy day, even on a bright sunny day with a roof, it's easy to end up in a situation where a lot of cameras, especially like my GoPro, is not going to get enough light. If you look at the video I did just recently, or maybe it's coming up, I have one where I film under the trees in the middle of the day in bright sunlight, and there's grain from just how dark the camera felt it was and trying to overcome the resolution of the shadows, right? Even on a bright sunny day outside, some cameras are not going to get enough light. And quite often you'll notice on the GoPros, especially on the brightest of days is when they look the best. It's because they really need that light. But when they get it, they have a great sensor. Now, if you're using something like the Olympus that I'm on now, I can go way darker. I mean, way darker. And if you're using like a modern Sony or Panasonic, you're going to get way darker than even this Olympus and still be able to produce amazing images. So your camera, this is a spot where a lot of money in your camera may make a big difference. An expensive $2,000 or $3,000 camera with $1,000 lenses, $2,000 lenses that are extremely fast lenses with a really high ISO native sensor can give you, and especially tends to be with the larger sensors with full frame or so, you're going to have a lot of opportunity for low light. So if that's what you're filming, consider that that is where, of all things, you may end up needing a different camera. But if you're in daylight, yeah, GoPro is going to work fine, but you always have to be aware of your lighting scenario. Now, if you are doing anything that is not all natural light, then you're going to want to think about studio lights. And this is where people really overlook this. Now, it's starting to be more and more of a thing on YouTube that people are becoming aware, because the whole process of good quality production for YouTube is becoming more popular and it's becoming more known. But good studio lights will make a giant difference. And you can start with simple ring lights, for example, and learn to work with those. You can bounce them off walls, you can move them directly on your face, you can change your placement. Multiple lights will help improve, but when you're really ready to do good lighting, studio lighting is generally going to cost hundreds of dollars, potentially thousands. You're probably going to want something where you can control the temperature of the light, that is, what type of daylight it emulates. And in some cases, you may want to have a full spectrum of color options, an RGB light where you can turn it blue or red or whatever, and control different lighting scenarios. Multiple lights make a big difference, and powerful lights make a big difference, as do diffusers. All those things you're going to want to research and see what makes sense for your studio space, for your recording conditions, for your needs. But this is a spot where you're going to want to spend money if you're not doing natural light very early, and probably your biggest expense. It's what's going to make the biggest difference. And more cameras you're going to get with bigger lights. You have more options of cameras, and it's easier to use your cell phone or a GoPro under those conditions because you're providing enough light. So that is our range of things to consider when you're looking at getting started on YouTube. Most importantly, just record and get out there. Don't let anything hold you back, but invest where it makes sense and pay attention to these different topics. And of course, make good content. But more importantly than anything, get something recorded, get it uploaded, and get started. And then tweak your process as you go. Thanks for joining me. Please remember to like and subscribe. If you have questions and comments, and I expect them, get down there below and send me notes. I love the conversation that we have here, and there's a lot of topic here to discuss. If you'd like to support the channel, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Scott Allen Miller. That does the most to support this channel and make all of this possible. As always, share on social media, and I will see all of you tomorrow.